The scent of ceremonial oils hung heavy in the air, mingling with the wood smoke from torches that lined the stone walls. My hands trembled as I clutched my mother's silver pendant, the only piece of her I had left. Outside, beyond the thick wooden door of my preparation chamber, I could hear the low murmurs of the pack gathering for what they called a union ceremony. I called it what it was, a transaction. "Hold still, Evelyn," Mira whispered, her fingers working swiftly to weave white winter blossoms into my pale blonde hair. The flowers felt cold against my scalp, a stark contrast to the warmth of tears threatening behind my eyes. "The council is already assembled, and the Alpha doesn't tolerate tardiness." The Alpha. King Dominic Ravencroft, a name that had been whispered with fear around our small border village for as long as I could remember. I'd never seen him. Few had. But stories of his battle scars and ruthless rule traveled far. They said half his face was a roadmap of scars from the Great Northern War, that his left eye gleamed silver in the darkness, that he could shift faster than any wolf in the 5 territories, that he had killed more challengers to his throne than any Alpha before him. And now, I was to be his wife. His property, more accurately. "My father should be here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as Mira pinned another blossom into my hair. "He's the one who gambled away our family's security. He's the one who lost everything to the Alpha's men. He should be the one facing the consequences." Mira's hands paused in my hair, our eyes meeting in the polished metal mirror before me. Her expression softened with pity, making my stomach turn. I didn't want pity. I wanted justice. "Your father is gone, Evelyn, left before dawn. The debt collectors already emptied your house of valuables." She hesitated, her fingers resuming their work with gentle precision. "At least this way you'll have shelter, food. The Alpha's castle is just a fancier prison," I finished, watching as a single tear escaped despite my efforts, tracking a lonely path down my cheek. I wiped it away quickly, leaving no evidence of weakness, and I'm just another asset being transferred to his ownership. My stomach clenched as I recalled my father's expression last night. Not remorse, not sorrow, but relief. Relief that his gambling debts to the Alpha's treasury would be forgiven in exchange for his only daughter. I was the sacrifice, the payment, the collateral damage of his weakness. For years, I had watched him spiral deeper into his addiction, losing first our savings, then our land, and finally, our dignity. But I never thought he would lose me too. I touched the silver pendant at my throat, remembering my mother's last words before illness took her 3 winters ago. "Your heart is stronger than you know, Evelyn. When everything else fails you, trust it." The pendant was shaped like a crescent moon embracing a small star, a family heirloom passed through generations of women in our line, women who had endured, survived, persevered. Would I live up to that legacy? What would she think of this arrangement? Her daughter, sold to the most feared Alpha in the territories. A man twice my age whose reputation for coldness was matched only by his reputation for brutality in battle. Mira stepped back to assess her work, then reached for the ceremonial cloak laid out across the bed. The fabric was finer than anything I'd ever worn. Deep blue velvet, lined with silver silk, embroidered with the symbols of both the Ravencroft pack and my village. A symbolic joining that was anything but equal. "Remember to breathe," Mira advised, fastening the cloak around my shoulders. "Keep your eyes lowered until spoken to directly. The pack has traditions older than any of us." A sharp knock at the door made me flinch. The wooden panels swung open without waiting for a response, and a woman entered, tall, severe, with gray streaking her dark hair and cold authority in her bearing. The Alpha's sister, Lady Helena. Her calculating eyes swept over me, assessing every detail from my ceremonial dress to my trembling hands. "It's time," she said, her voice as crisp as autumn frost. Her eyes appraised me clinically, sweeping from my elaborate hairstyle to the hem of my gown. "You'll do, I suppose. Remember, girl, you're not here to be coddled. You're here to secure an heir and maintain the alliance with your border village. Nothing more." I swallowed hard, gathering courage I wasn't sure I possessed. "And what does your brother think of this arrangement?" Something flickered across her face. Surprise at my boldness, perhaps, or irritation at what she perceived as insolence. "My brother thinks of duty, girl, as should you." She gestured toward the door, with a hand adorned with silver rings of office. Now come. The ceremony begins, and we've kept the pack waiting long enough. Mira squeezed my hand one last time before releasing me to Lady Helena's custody. The gesture was small, but carried the weight of farewell. We both knew that after tonight, I would no longer belong to the village or its people. I would belong to the Ravencroft pack, to its scarred king. The great hall was dim, lit only by torchlight and the silver glow of the full moon through the skylights. The stone walls, ancient and imposing, seemed to absorb the whispers of hundreds of pack members who turned to watch me as I walked the long path toward the raised dais. Members of the pack lined the walls, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright pity. Some I recognized from their visits to our village, traders, warriors, collectors of my father's debts. Others were strangers, their faces bearing the proud, wild look of born wolves. And there he was, standing tall and imposing on the platform, clothed in ceremonial black leather and silver. King Dominic Ravencroft, the Alpha. The stories hadn't prepared me, yes. The right side of his face was marked by 3 long, savage scars that pulled at the corner of his mouth into what might have been mistaken for a perpetual snarl, yes. His left eye gleamed silver in the torchlight, a stark contrast to the deep brown of his right. But what the stories failed to mention was his presence, the sheer wall of power that seemed to emanate from him. He stood unnaturally still, watching me approach with an expression I couldn't read. His broad shoulders squared beneath a cloak of black fur. His dark hair was swept back, revealing the full extent of his scarred visage. I clutched my mother's pendant tighter, feeling the cool silver press into my palm as I tried to draw strength from it. Each step felt heavier than the last as I approached my future, my sentence. The ceremonial music, a low, haunting melody played on strings and drums, seemed to pulse in time with my racing heart. The ceremony passed in a blur of ancient words and ritual, the binding of hands with silver thread, his large calloused palm against my smaller one. The recitation of duties, protection in exchange for loyalty, strength for submission. The formal acknowledgement of my father's debt, now considered paid in full. Not once did the Alpha speak directly to me. Not once did our eyes truly meet, though I felt his gaze studying me when I wasn't looking. "You belong to the pack now," the elder announced, his voice carrying to the far corners of the hall, as he addressed me but looked at the Alpha, and to its king. The silver thread was cut, but the symbolic bond remained. A bond that would last until death, either his or mine. When it was done, when I was officially the property of the Ravencroft pack and its scarred king, a feast commenced. I sat beside my new husband at the high table, untouched food growing cold before me, as pack members approached one by one to offer congratulations that sounded hollow even to my untrained ear. The women assessed me with curious, sometimes hostile eyes. The men barely looked at me at all, directing their words to their Alpha instead. "Eat," the Alpha said suddenly, his deep voice startling me. It was the first word he had spoken to me directly, a single syllable that somehow contained command, observation, and something I couldn't quite identify. I looked up at him, finding his mismatched eyes, one dark brown, one silvery gray, fixed on me with unsettling intensity. "I'm not hungry," I replied, surprised by my own daring. "Regardless, you will eat." His tone left no room for argument, though it wasn't unkind. "You're pale. The journey from your village was long, and the ceremony draining. I won't have you fainting." His concern, I realized, wasn't for my comfort, but for appearances. How it would look if his new bride collapsed on their wedding night. What weakness it might suggest to the watching eyes of the pack. I forced myself to take a small bite of bread, then another. He watched until satisfied, then turned away to speak with a council member who had approached with matters that apparently couldn't wait, even on this night. The night wore on endlessly. Music played. Pack members danced in celebrations that grew increasingly wild as more wine flowed. I remained seated beside a husband who may as well have been carved from stone for all the warmth he showed. I observed him carefully from the corner of my eye. Despite his fearsome appearance, there was something almost elegant in his movements, precise, controlled, deliberate. He drank little, ate less, and spoke only when necessary. Occasionally, his hand would tense on the table, his gaze scanning the room as if sensing something no one else could perceive. When the moon reached its zenith, visible through the skylight directly above the high table, Lady Helena approached again. "It's time to retire," she said, her eyes flicking between her brother and me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Was it concern? Expectation? Warning? My heart began to race, a trapped bird against my ribcage. This was the part I had been dreading most, the consummation that would seal the union and secure my place as the Alpha's mate. I felt my hands grow clammy, my breath shorten as panic threatened to overwhelm me. The Alpha rose, extending a hand toward me with formal rigidity. "Come," he said simply, the word both invitation and command. I placed my trembling hand in his, surprised by its warmth. For someone rumored to be as cold as winter, his touch burned like fire against my skin. He led me from the great hall, through winding stone corridors lit by flickering torches. Guards and servants bowed as we passed, their eyes carefully averted. No one spoke. The only sounds were our footsteps, and the distant howls of wolves from the forest beyond the castle walls, a wild, mournful song that seemed to echo something inside me. Finally, we reached a massive wooden door carved with the Ravencroft pack symbol, a raven with a wolf's eye at its center. The Alpha pushed it open to reveal chambers more luxurious than anything I had seen before. A fire burned in a stone hearth larger than my entire bedroom at home. Furs and tapestries adorned the walls, depicting scenes of hunts and battles from pack history. A massive four-poster bed dominated the far wall, draped with furs and silk in the dark blue and silver colors of the Ravencroft line. The Alpha released my hand and stepped away, creating distance between us. I turned to face him, uncertain, afraid, but determined not to show it. "These are your chambers," he said, his voice controlled, revealing nothing of his thoughts. "Mine connect through that door." He nodded toward a smaller door in the side wall. "You will want for nothing material. Servants will attend you. You have full access to the castle grounds, but not beyond the walls without escort." I stared at him, confusion replacing fear. You're not staying?" Something flickered across his scarred face. Surprise, perhaps, or something deeper I couldn't name. "No," he said after a moment. "The union is legally binding without that. For now." He turned to leave through the side door, then paused, his broad shoulders tense beneath his ceremonial attire. Without turning back to me, he spoke, his voice lower than before. "Your father owed a debt he could not pay. Now it is paid. Whatever he may have done, that burden is no longer yours to carry." Before I could respond, he was gone, the door closing firmly behind him, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and the echoing silence. I stood alone in the chambers of the Alpha Queen, a title I now held in name only. Relief washed through me, followed quickly by confusion. This was not what I had expected, not what I had feared, not what the whispers about the Alpha King had led me to believe. I crossed to the window and looked out at the moonlit forest that surrounded the castle. Somewhere in those trees, wolves ran free under the silver light. Somewhere beyond them was the village I had called home, the home my father had lost to us with his reckless gambling. I touched my mother's pendant again, drawing strength from it. "Your heart is stronger than you know," I whispered to myself, her words becoming my own. And for the first time since learning of my fate, I allowed myself to consider that perhaps, just perhaps, this arrangement might not be the prison sentence I had imagined, at least, not in the way I had feared. As I prepared for bed, I caught a glimpse of movement in the courtyard below. The Alpha, now dressed in simpler clothes, was walking alone toward the forest edge. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the rigid control in his stride. For a moment, he paused, looking up toward my window as if sensing my observation, before continuing into the shadows of the trees. What scars did he carry that couldn't be seen? What secrets lay behind those mismatched eyes? What kind of man was this Alpha who claimed me as wife yet left me untouched? I didn't know, but something told me I would find out. Sleep eluded me that first night. Every creak of the ancient castle, every distant howl from the forest sent my heart racing anew. I kept expecting the adjoining door to open, for the Alpha to change his mind about the consummation of our union. But dawn arrived with the door still firmly closed. A soft knock at the main entrance startled me from my vigil by the window, where I'd watched the mist rise from the forest floor as night surrendered to morning. A young woman entered, her head bowed respectfully. "My queen," she said, the title strange and ill-fitting. "I'm Sarah. I've been assigned as your personal attendant." She gestured behind her, where 2 other servants waited with steaming buckets of water. "May we prepare your bath, queen?" The word echoed hollowly. I was no queen. I was collateral. "Yes, thank you," I said, watching as they filled a copper tub behind a privacy screen. The normalcy of the morning routine felt surreal against the backdrop of my new reality. "The Alpha requests your presence at breakfast," Sarah informed me as she laid out a gown of soft gray wool. "The Pack Council will be in attendance." My first public appearance as the Alpha Queen. A test, no doubt. "Tell me about them," I said, stepping into the bath and letting the hot water soothe my tense muscles. "The council members." Sarah seemed surprised by my interest, but obliged. "There's Lord Thaddeus, the Alpha's most trusted advisor and war general. Lady Imogen, who oversees the territory's commerce. Master Garrick, our head healer. And of course, Lady Helena, the Alpha's sister." "And what of the Alpha himself? What should I know about him?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Sarah's hands stilled as she gathered my bathing oils. "The king is private, my lady. He bears the weight of the Pack's survival on his shoulders. The scars." She stopped herself abruptly. "Go on," I prompted gently. She sighed. "The scars are from the Battle of Moonfall Ridge 5 years ago. He saved the entire Northern Alliance, but at great cost. Half the Ravencroft warriors were lost that day, including his father, the previous Alpha." Her voice dropped lower. "Some say he hasn't been the same since, that something inside him scarred deeper than his face." I absorbed this information silently as Sarah helped me dress. The castle was beginning to awaken around us. Footsteps in corridors, voices calling out orders, the clang of training weapons from somewhere below. This was a military stronghold as much as a royal residence, I realized. By the time Sarah finished arranging my hair, simpler than the wedding style, but still more elaborate than anything I'd worn in my village, I had composed myself into what I hoped was a dignified calm. "Remember to address the council members by their titles," Sarah advised as she escorted me through the winding corridors. "And the Alpha always speaks first at council meetings." The dining hall was smaller than the great hall of last night's ceremony, but no less intimidating with its stone walls and massive fireplace. 5 people were already seated at a long oak table when we arrived. All conversation ceased as I entered. The Alpha rose from his place at the head of the table. In daylight, his scars looked even more severe against his tanned skin, but there was an undeniable power in his bearing that commanded respect. He wore no crown, only a simple silver pin at his collar bearing the Ravencroft symbol. "My queen," he said formally, inclining his head slightly. "Join us." I approached the empty chair to his right, acutely aware of the assessing gazes of the council. Lady Helena's cold eyes watched from his left. Beside her sat an elderly man with shrewd eyes. Lord Thaddeus, I presumed. A striking woman with copper hair and sharp features. Lady Imogen, perhaps. A younger man with healer's hands. And a warrior, whose massive frame dwarfed his chair. "I trust you rested well," the Alpha said, as servants placed food before me. Bread, fruit, smoked meats. "Well enough, thank you," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. A flicker of something, approval, crossed his face before he turned to Lord Thaddeus. "Continue your report." As the council meeting resumed around me, I observed in silence, gleaning what I could about pack politics, border tensions with the eastern wolves, trade disputes with human settlements, supply concerns for the coming winter. Throughout it all, the Alpha listened more than he spoke. But when he did, his decisions were swift and final. I noticed how Lady Helena watched me when she thought I wasn't looking, her expression calculating. The others largely ignored me, as if unsure what to make of this human bride their alpha had acquired through such unusual means. When the meal concluded, the alpha addressed me directly again. Lady Helena will show you the castle grounds today. You should familiarize yourself with your new home. A command, not a suggestion. Before I could respond, he was gone, striding from the room with the male council members following in his wake. Lady Helena's mouth tightened into what might generously be called a smile. Come, girl, let's see what you're made of. The tour felt more like an interrogation as we walked through courtyards, gardens, and corridors. Lady Helena pointed out places I was permitted to go, and those that were forbidden, the training grounds, the council chambers, the underground tunnels used during attacks. Why did your brother agree to take me as payment for my father's debts? I finally asked as we stood on the castle walls, looking out over the vast forest that surrounded us on 3 sides. Surely there were other ways to recover the money. Lady Helena's laugh was sharp as winter wind. Do you think so highly of yourself? The pack needed this alliance with your border village, strategically located as it is. Your father's debts provided a convenient excuse. She studied me with those cold eyes. Besides, my brother needs an heir. His first wife couldn't provide one. My breath caught. First wife? She died 3 years ago, illness. Her tone suggested the subject was closed, but I couldn't stop myself. Did he love her? The question seemed to surprise her. Love is a human weakness, girl. For us, duty comes first. Remember that. She turned away. You'll join the Alpha for dinner tonight. Alone, try not to disappoint him. The rest of the day passed in solitude. I explored my chambers more thoroughly, finding a small library of books, fine clothing in the wardrobes, even writing materials. A gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. As sunset approached, Sarah returned to help me prepare for dinner. She chose a deep blue gown that complemented my fair coloring, arranging my pale hair in a style that was elegant yet simple. You look beautiful, my queen, she said, stepping back to admire her work. I touched my mother's pendant for reassurance. Sarah, what happened to the Alpha's first wife, really? Sarah's expression clouded. Lady Vivian was kind, gentle, human, like you. They were joined for political reasons as well, but... She hesitated. The Alpha mourned her deeply when the fever took her. He hasn't allowed anyone close since. And now I'm here to replace her, I said softly. No one could replace her, came a deep voice from the doorway. I spun around to find the Alpha standing there, his expression unreadable. Sarah quickly bowed and excused herself, leaving us alone. Silence stretched between us, taut with unspoken thoughts. Finally, he spoke again. I apologize. That was... unkind. The admission surprised me. No, it was honest. I appreciate honesty. His mismatched eyes studied me intently. Do you? Then let me be honest, Evelyn. This arrangement is not what either of us would have chosen, but it is what duty demands of us both. He offered his arm. After a moment's hesitation, I took it, feeling the solid strength beneath the fine fabric of his shirt. He led me to a private dining room where a small table was set with candles and wine. My sister can be harsh, he said as we ate, but she is loyal to the pack above all. Including you? I asked. The question drew a sound from him that might have been a laugh, especially me. She believes I've grown too soft since Moonfall Ridge. Soft is not the word I would use to describe you, I said before I could stop myself. This time, his lips definitely curved. No. What word would you use then? I considered him carefully. Controlled. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps recognition. Our conversation through dinner remained cautious but not uncomfortable. He asked about my village, my skills. I can read and write, and I know basic healing herbs. My knowledge of pack politics, minimal. I, in turn, learned small things about him, his preference for simplicity over luxury, his habit of reading historical accounts before sleep, his dislike of council politics. When we finished eating, he escorted me back to my chambers. Tomorrow, he said at my door, I have matters to attend to in the Eastern Territory. I'll be gone for 3 days. I see. I wasn't sure what else to say. He seemed to struggle with something, then added, Use the time to settle in. The pack will be watching you. judging whether you're worthy of your position. Show them you are. And am I? Worthy? I asked, the question escaping before wisdom could contain it. His expression softened fractionally. That remains to be seen, doesn't it? Without another word, he turned and left me alone with my thoughts. The next 3 days passed in a blur of exploration and observation. I spent hours in the castle library, reading about pack history and wolf customs. I visited the kitchens, the gardens, the weaving rooms, introducing myself to servants who regarded me with cautious curiosity. Lady Helena watched from a distance, assessing. I felt other eyes on me too, pack members judging this human girl who had suddenly become their queen. On the 3rd evening, as I sat by my window watching storm clouds gather over the forest, Sirab burst into my chambers without knocking. "My queen, come quickly. The Alpha's party has returned, but there's been an attack. He's wounded." My heart lurched as I followed her through the castle to the healer's quarters. The room was chaos. Bloodied warriors, healers rushing between beds, the sharp scent of medicinal herbs mixing with the metallic smell of blood, and there, on a central table, lay the Alpha. His shirt had been cut away, revealing a muscular torso now marred by deep gashes across his chest and shoulder. His breathing was labored, his skin pale beneath his tan. Master Garrick, the head healer, looked up as I entered. "My queen, you shouldn't be here." "What happened?" I demanded, moving to the Alpha's side. His eyes were closed, his face tense with pain. "Ambushed by the eastern wolves," Lord Thaddeus growled from nearby, his own arm being bandaged. "They've grown bold since moonfall. Attacked our party at the border crossing." Lady Helena appeared at my other side. "Leave, girl. This is no place for you." Something inside me hardened. I am his wife. I am the queen. I stay. Before she could argue, I turned to Master Garrick. "I know herbs. Let me help." The healer hesitated, then nodded. "Wash your hands, then hold these wound edges together while I stitch." For hours, I assisted as they worked to save the Alpha and his injured warriors. My fingers grew stained with blood. My back ached from bending over the wounded, but I refused to leave. I cleaned wounds, mixed poultices, held bandages in place, and all the while, I spoke softly to the Alpha, whether he could hear me or not. "You will heal," I told him as Master Garrick stitched the worst of his wounds. "Your pack needs you. You are strong enough to survive this." Dawn was breaking when the crisis finally passed. The Alpha had been moved to his chambers, his wounds cleaned and bandaged, herbal medicines administered to fight infection. The other injured warriors were stable. I stood by the window in the Alpha's room, exhausted but unwilling to leave. "You should rest," Lady Helena said from the doorway, her voice lacking its usual edge. "You've done adequately." From her, I suspected this was high praise. "I'll stay a while longer," I replied. When she had gone, I moved to sit beside the Alpha's bed, in sleep. Some of the hardness left his face, though pain still creased his brow. I reached out hesitantly, then gently laid my hand over his. "I don't know if you can hear me," I whispered. "But I'm here. You're not alone." His fingers twitched beneath mine, then slowly curled to hold my hand. His eyes remained closed, but I felt the deliberate pressure of his grip. Something shifted inside me, a crack in the wall I'd built around my heart since learning of my father's bargain. This scarred, complex man was not the monster of my fears, nor was he the heartless ruler of pack legends. He was something far more dangerous. He was human beneath his strength, vulnerable beneath his power. As morning light filtered through the windows, illuminating the Alpha's sleeping form and our joined hands, I realized with startling clarity that my fate was becoming something I hadn't anticipated. Not just a duty, not just a bargain, but something with the dangerous potential to matter. The Alpha's recovery progressed slowly over the next week. I divided my time between assisting the healers and learning more about my role as queen. The pack members who had initially regarded me with suspicion began to look at me differently after word spread of my vigil by the Alpha's bedside. Not with warmth, exactly, but with a grudging reassessment. On the 8th day after the attack, I entered the Alpha's chambers with fresh bandages to find him standing by the window, shirtless, his bandaged torso illuminated by morning light. The sight of him, alive, upright, powerful even in his wounded state, sent a flutter through my chest that I wasn't prepared for. "You should be resting," I said, setting down my supplies. He turned, his mismatched eyes finding mine. "I've rested enough." Master Garrick disagrees. A low sound rumbled in his chest, almost a growl. "Master Garrick is not the Alpha," I approached him, medical herbs in hand. "No, but he is the one who saved your life. With my help," I added boldly. "Now sit down and let me change your bandages." For a moment, I thought he might refuse. Then, surprisingly, his lips curved slightly, and he lowered himself to the edge of his bed. "You've grown comfortable giving orders, Evelyn." The sound of my name on his lips sent another unexpected flutter through me. It was the first time he'd used it. "Someone has to when the patient is being stubborn," I replied, carefully removing the old bandages. The wounds beneath were healing well, angry and red still, but clean, without signs of infection. My fingers moved gently across his skin, aware of every breath he took, every subtle reaction to my touch. "The council tells me you've been active in my absence," he said, watching me work. I kept my eyes on the task. "I've been learning about the pack, the castle, my duties." "You sat with the village representatives yesterday." "Yes. They brought concerns about winter preparations." "I listen." I glanced up, finding him studying me intently. "I hope I didn't overstep." "No." He seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "Lady Helena says you handled them well." Coming from Lady Helena, that was practically effusive praise. I finished securing the fresh bandages and stepped back, suddenly aware of our proximity, of his bare skin under my hands, of the intimate setting of his bedroom. "The Eastern Wolves," I said, changing the subject. "Lord Thaddeus believes their attack wasn't random." His expression darkened. "It wasn't. Because of me? Because of our union?" The Alpha stood, towering over me, his presence filling the room despite his injuries. "Not everything is about you, Evelyn." The words stung more than they should have. "Of course. I just thought the Eastern Pack has been testing our borders for months. They see the scars on my face and think me weakened." His voice was low, controlled fury vibrating beneath the surface. "They are mistaken." "And what will you do about it?" I asked. He moved to a table where maps were spread out, his shoulders tense. "What I must, what I've always done. Protect what's mine." The possessive word hung in the air between us. Was I included in that category now? Something to be protected, like territory. "I want to help," I said quietly. He looked back at me, surprise evident in his expression. "Why? This isn't your fight. You're here because of your father's debts, not by choice. I'm here now, regardless of how I came to be. This is my home. These are my people too." The words felt strange on my tongue, but not untrue. "And I'm not as useless as you might think." Something shifted in his gaze, a reassessment perhaps. "No," he said finally. "I don't think you're useless at all." That night, the Alpha insisted on rejoining the evening meal in the Great Hall, against Master Garrick's advice. I walked beside him, acutely aware of his slightly stiff movements, the careful way he held himself to hide any sign of pain. Pride, I was learning, was as much the Alpha's strength as it was his weakness. The hall fell silent as we entered, hundreds of eyes watching as we made our way to the high table. I felt the weight of their expectations, their judgment. The Alpha showed no weakness, moving with deliberate authority to his seat. "The Eastern Wolves think me weak," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "They are mistaken, and they will learn that lesson soon enough." Cheers erupted, wolves banging cups against the tables in approval. I sat beside the Alpha, watching the fervor his words inspired. This was the leader they needed, strong, uncompromising, fearless, but I had seen him vulnerable. I had felt his hand seek mine in pain and darkness. I knew there was more to him than this warrior facade. After the meal, as servants cleared away plates and pack members lingered over drinks, A young wolf approached our table. He couldn't have been more than 16, with a shock of dark hair and determined eyes. "Alpha King," he said, bowing deeply. "I wish to volunteer for the border patrol." The Alpha studied him. "You're Thomas's son." "Yes, my king. My father fell at Moonfall Ridge." The boy stood straighter. "I'm ready to serve the pack as he did." I saw a shadow cross the Alpha's face, brief but unmistakable, the memory of Moonfall Ridge, where half his warriors had died, including this boy's father. "How old are you?" the Alpha asked. 16, sir. Old enough to fight." "Old enough to die, you mean?" The words were harsh, but something in the Alpha's tone wasn't. "And what does your mother think of this plan?" The boy's confidence faltered. "She doesn't know I'm asking." The Alpha nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "Return to your training when you're 18, and if your mother consents, I'll consider your request. But, sir, that's my decision. Final, brooking no argument." The boy bowed again and retreated, disappointment evident in his posture. I watched him go, then turned to find the Alpha's eyes on me. "You disapprove," he said, not a question. "No," I replied honestly. "I think you spared both him and his mother more grief." Something like surprise flickered across his face. "Most would say I denied the pack a willing warrior. Most didn't see the cost of Moonfall Ridge in your eyes just now." He went very still. Around us, the great hall continued its evening revelry, but we seemed suddenly alone in our quiet exchange. "Walk with me," he said abruptly, rising from his seat. Curious, I followed him from the hall into the cool night air of a side courtyard. The moon hung nearly full above us, stars scattered across the clear sky. The Alpha moved to the stone balustrade, looking out over the forest beyond the castle walls. "Moonfall Ridge was a massacre," he said after a long silence. "We were outnumbered 3-1. My father knew it was likely a suicide mission, but he believed the alternative, letting the Northern Alliance fall, was worse." His hands gripped the stone railing. I tried to convince him to retreat, to find another way. "He called me a coward." I said nothing, sensing he needed to speak more than he needed my response. "He died in my arms, still believing I lacked the courage to do what was necessary." The Alpha's voice had grown quieter. "The scars on my face, they came from protecting his body, ensuring he could be returned with honor." I moved closer, standing beside him in the moonlight, and the pack never knew. What would be the point? He was their Alpha, their leader. They needed to believe he died a hero's death. "And you? What did you need?" He turned to look at me then, his scarred face silvered by moonlight. "Nothing. I needed nothing. I became what the pack required, a leader who would not fail them as they believed my father had." The depth of his sacrifice struck me. Not just the physical scars, but the burden he carried silently. The legacy he protected at cost to himself. "The boy tonight," I said softly. "You saw his father in him." The Alpha nodded once. "Thomas died saving 3 others. A true hero, unlike—" He stopped himself. "Unlike your father," I finished. "You honor Thomas's sacrifice by protecting his son, even from himself. It's what a true Alpha would do." His gaze returned to the forest. "At least it's what I believe." In that moment, I saw him clearly. Not the fearsome Alpha King of legend, nor the cold man who had accepted me as payment for a debt, but a leader trying to be better than what came before him. A man carrying wounds far deeper than those I had tended on his body. "Your father was wrong," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "about your courage." He looked at me sharply, as if no one had ever suggested such a thing. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said, but without heat. "I know enough." I reached out hesitantly, then, in a moment of boldness, placed my hand over his on the stone railing. "I know that true courage isn't rushing headlong into battles. It's standing firm to protect what matters, even when no one sees the cost." His hand turned beneath mine, our palms meeting, fingers interlacing with surprising gentleness. Neither of us spoke, standing side by side in the moonlight as something unspoken passed between us. An understanding, perhaps, or the beginning of one. After a long moment, he released my hand and stepped back. "It's late. You should rest." The moment had broken, but not harshly. I nodded, understanding his retreat. "Good night, Alpha King." As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. "Dominic." I looked back. "What?" "My name. When we're alone, you may call me Dominic." His expression was unreadable in the shadows. "If you wish." The concession felt monumental somehow. A small grant of intimacy in our arranged union. "Good night, Dominic," I said, testing the name on my lips. Something that might have been a smile ghosted across his face. "Good night, Evelyn." In the days that followed, subtle shifts occurred between us. We dined together each evening, our conversations gradually extending beyond pack politics to personal interests, childhood memories, hopes for the future of the territories. I learned he had a dry sense of humor beneath his serious exterior. He discovered my love of literature and history. Meanwhile, I continued integrating myself into pack life. I visited the village that bordered the castle, meeting with the elders, listening to concerns about the coming winter. I observed training sessions in the courtyard, watched council meetings, spent afternoons in the kitchens learning traditional pack recipes. Lady Helena remained cold, but no longer openly hostile. "You're trying very hard," she remarked one afternoon as we supervised the preservation of harvest fruits. "Is that a criticism?" I asked. "An observation. My brother seems different since your arrival." "Different how?" She studied me with those calculating eyes. "He speaks more, listens more. The council has noted it." I wasn't sure how to respond. Had Dominic changed, or was he simply revealing more of himself to me, and perhaps by extension to others? 2 weeks after the Eastern Wolves' attack, Dominic announced he would lead a hunting party into the forest. His wounds had healed well, leaving new scars to join the old. I stood in our courtyard as the hunting party assembled. Warriors checking weapons, servants loading supplies. "Be careful," I said as Dominic prepared to mount his horse. He looked down at me, something warm in his gaze. "I always am. Your recent injuries suggest otherwise." That almost smile appeared again. "I'll return by nightfall." A premonition gripped me suddenly, a nameless dread that settled in my chest. "Dominic." He surprised me by reaching down to touch my cheek briefly. "Trust me, Evelyn." As I watched them ride out, Lady Helena appeared at my side. "You care for him," she said. Not a question. I didn't deny it. Somehow, against all odds and expectations, I had come to care for the scarred Alpha King who had claimed me as payment for a debt. "Is that so strange?" "It's dangerous," she replied. "For both of you." Before I could ask what she meant, a commotion at the main gates drew our attention. A rider approached, not from our pack. Based on his unfamiliar colors, a messenger. The guards intercepted him, but upon hearing his business, escorted him directly to Lady Helena and me. He bowed hastily. "Message for the Alpha King," he said, extending a sealed parchment. "The Alpha is not present," Lady Helena replied. "I am his sister, and this is his queen. You may deliver your message to us." The messenger hesitated only briefly before handing over the parchment. Lady Helena broke the seal and read quickly, her expression darkening. "What is it?" I asked. She handed me the message, her voice tight. "Your father has returned. He's at the Eastern Wolf settlement, claiming you were taken against your will and demanding your return." My blood ran cold as I read the words. My father, the man who had gambled me away like property, who had fled rather than face the consequences of his actions, now dared to position himself as my protector. "This makes no sense," I said. "Why would he do this?" Lady Helena's eyes were sharp. "The better question is why the Eastern Wolves would entertain his claims at all. Unless they're using him as an excuse," I realized. A pretext for conflict with Dominic. "The hunting party," Lady Helena said suddenly, her gaze snapping to the forest. "They're headed straight for the eastern border." Understanding hit us both simultaneously. The Eastern Wolves had laid a trap, using my father as bait, knowing Dominic would be drawn out of the castle's protection. "We have to warn them," I said, already moving toward the stables. Lady Helena caught my arm. "It's too dangerous. I'll send warriors. There's no time." I pulled free. "They'll listen to me." I'm his queen. Something like respect flickered in Lady Helena's eyes. Then I'm coming with you. Within minutes, we were galloping toward the forest, a small guard of warriors around us. My heart pounded with each hoofbeat, fear for Dominic churning inside me. The forest grew denser as we rode, shadows lengthening as afternoon waned. We had just crossed a shallow river when we heard it. The unmistakable sounds of combat ahead. Growls, shouts, the clash of weapons. My horse reared in fright, and I struggled to control it as Lady Helena signaled our party to halt. "Stay back," she ordered, dismounting. "The rest of you, with me." But I was already off my horse, running toward the sounds of battle, ignoring her commands to stop. Through the trees, I caught glimpses of the fight. Wolves in both human and shifted form locked in combat, blood on the forest floor. Chaos. And there in the center was Dominic, his sword flashing as he fought off two attackers. Even as I watched, a third opponent circled behind him, preparing to strike. "Dominic!" I screamed, breaking through the tree line. He turned at my voice, saw the danger, and barely avoided the strike. Our eyes met across the battlefield, his widening in shock at my presence. In that moment of distraction, one of his opponents lunged. Time seemed to slow as I watched the blade arc toward him. Without thinking, I rushed forward, throwing myself between Dominic and his attacker. Pain exploded across my side as the blade found me instead of its intended target. I heard Dominic's roar of fury, felt myself falling, caught a glimpse of him shifting forms, man to massive black wolf in one fluid, terrifying motion, before darkness swept over me. My last conscious thought was of Dominic's eyes, mismatched brown and silver, filled with a fear I had never seen there before. Consciousness returned in fragments, whispered voices, the sting of medicine on my wound, the softness of furs beneath me. I drifted in and out of awareness, catching glimpses of worried faces hovering above me. Master Garrick, Sarah, Lady Helena, but not the face I most wanted to see. When I finally awakened fully, moonlight was streaming through the windows of my chamber. I tried to sit up and gasped as pain lanced through my side. "Be still," came a deep voice from the shadows. Dominic stepped into the moonlight, his face haggard with exhaustion, his clothes still bearing traces of the forest battle. He moved to my bedside, lowering himself to a chair that suggested he had been keeping vigil. "What happened?" I asked, my voice raspy from disuse. "You nearly died." His words were clipped, tightly controlled. "The blade that struck you was poisoned." Memory rushed back. The ambush in the forest, throwing myself between Dominic and his attacker, the burning pain as the blade cut into my side. The hunting party? All survived. The eastern wolves retreated after... He paused. After I shifted. I recalled that last glimpse before losing consciousness, Dominic's human form giving way to the massive black wolf of the Alpha. The transformation had been both terrifying and magnificent. And my father? The question tasted bitter on my tongue. Dominic's expression hardened, captured. He was indeed working with the eastern wolves, though whether willingly or under coercion remains unclear. I closed my eyes, shame washing through me. "I'm sorry." "For what? Your father's actions aren't yours to apologize for." "I endangered you. I should have listened to Lady Helena, stayed at the castle." "Yes, you should have," he interrupted, anger finally breaking through his control. "It was reckless and foolish to ride into battle untrained, unprotected." His words stung, but I met his gaze steadily. "I was trying to warn you. At the cost of your own life?" He stood abruptly, pacing beside the bed. "Do you have any idea what it felt like to see you fall? To smell the poison in your blood and know I might not be able to save you?" The raw emotion in his voice stunned me. This wasn't just the concern of an alpha for his queen. This was something deeper, more personal. "You care," I whispered, the realization warming me from within. He stopped pacing, his back to me, shoulders rigid. "Of course I care. You are my responsibility. Is that all I am?" Slowly he turned to face me. In the silvery moonlight, his scars seemed to soften, and for the first time, I saw beyond them to the man beneath. Conflicted, guarded, but not as cold as he wanted the world to believe. "No," he admitted quietly. "That's not all you are." He returned to my bedside, lowering himself to sit on the edge of the bed. With uncharacteristic gentleness, he took my hand in his. "For 3 days, I thought I might lose you," he said, his voice low. "Master Garrick worked tirelessly to draw the poison out. You fought bravely, even unconscious." I squeezed his hand weakly. "I'm stronger than I look." "Yes," he agreed, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "You've proven that repeatedly." We sat in companionable silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken feelings hovering between us. Finally, I asked the question that had been troubling me since reading the messenger's note. "Why would my father do this? Use me as a pawn against you?" Dominic's expression darkened. "That's what I intend to find out. He's being held in the Eastern Tower. When you're stronger, perhaps you'll want to speak with him." The thought of facing my father filled me with dread and anger in equal measure. "Yes," I said finally, "I think I must." Dominic nodded, then surprised me by lifting my hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to my knuckles. "Rest now. Heal. The pack needs its queen." As he rose to leave, I caught his wrist. "Stay? Just until I fall asleep?" Something softened in his eyes. Without a word, he settled back into the chair beside my bed, his hand still holding mine. The last thing I saw before drifting into healing sleep was his face, watchful and protective in the moonlight. Recovery was slow but steady. My wound, cleaned of poison, began to heal properly. Each day I grew stronger, first sitting up in bed, then taking short walks around my chambers, and finally venturing into the castle corridors on Dominic's arm. The pack's attitude toward me had transformed completely. Word had spread of how I had thrown myself between the Alpha and an assassin's blade. Servants bowed deeper as I passed. Warriors saluted. Even Lady Helena treated me with newfound respect. "They see you as one of them now," she told me one afternoon as we walked in the gardens. "Few humans would risk their life for a wolf, especially an alpha." "I didn't think," I admitted. "I just acted." She studied me with those calculating eyes that had grown somewhat warmer over time. "That's precisely why it matters. Instinct, not calculation." A week after I regained consciousness, I felt strong enough to face my father. Dominic insisted on accompanying me to the Eastern Tower where he was being held. "Are you certain you're ready for this?" he asked as we climbed the winding stairs. "No," I answered honestly, "but it needs to be done." The cell was sparse but not cruel. A bed, a chair, a small window overlooking the forest. My father stood as we entered, his once handsome face now haggard and drawn. Seeing him again after everything that had happened was like looking at a stranger who wore familiar features. "Evelyn," he breathed, moving toward me before stopping at Dominic's warning growl. "Father," I acknowledged coolly. "You look terrible." He had the grace to wince. "Not as bad as I deserve, I'm sure." "Why?" The single word carried the weight of all my questions. "Why did you gamble away our security? Why did you leave me to face the consequences? Why align with the Eastern Wolves against the man you sold me to?" "I never meant for any of this to happen," he began, the familiar cadence of his excuses making my jaw tighten. "The gambling. It's a sickness, Evelyn. I couldn't stop. When the debts mounted, I panicked. The Alpha's men were going to take everything. So you gave them me instead," I said flatly. He looked away, shame finally showing on his face. "It was wrong. I knew it was wrong the moment I agreed. I fled because I couldn't bear to see what I'd done to you." "And the Eastern Wolves?" Dominic interjected, his voice dangerously calm. My father swallowed hard. "They found me in a tavern near the border. Their Alpha, Varan, recognized me from descriptions. He offered me gold, protection, a new start, if I would help create a distraction for their planned attack on your hunting party." "By claiming my wife was taken against her will," Dominic stated. "Yes." My father looked at me pleadingly. "I told myself it might actually save you, Evelyn, that if they succeeded, you might be free." "Free?" I echoed, incredulous. "You thought trading one forced arrangement for another was freedom? Or did you just convince yourself of that to ease your conscience?" He had no answer for that. I stepped closer to the bars separating us. "Listen carefully, Father. I am not your pawn. I am not your bargaining chip. I am the queen of the Ravencroft pack now. By my own choice. His eyes widened at the authority in my voice. A voice he had never heard from his obedient daughter before. The Evelyn you knew, the one who cleaned up your messes, who made excuses for your behavior, who believed your promises to change. She's gone. You killed her when you traded her away like property. Tears filled his eyes, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no remorse, just a hollow acceptance that this chapter of my life needed to close. What happens to him? I asked Dominic as we descended the tower stairs. That's for you to decide, he replied, surprising me. He betrayed the pack, collaborated with our enemies, but he's your father. I considered this as we walked in silence back to the main castle. The weight of such a decision felt enormous, yet somehow fitting. I was no longer the village girl sold to repay a debt. I was the Alpha Queen. Exile, I said finally as we reached the castle courtyard. Strip him of connection to the pack and to me. Let him go far from here and start again, if he can. Dominic studied me. And if he returns? If he causes more harm? Then his life is forfeit. The words tasted bitter but necessary. But at least I will have given him one last chance, not for his sake but for mine, so I can be free of him without blood on my hands. Dominic nodded solemnly. It will be done as you wish. That evening, as we dined privately in my chambers, a different atmosphere settled between us. My confrontation with my father had shifted something inside me, closed one door while opening another. When I first came here, I said as we sat before the fire after our meal, I thought this was a prison sentence, a punishment for crimes I didn't commit. Dominic watched me over the rim of his wineglass. And now? Now I see it differently, not as an ending, but a beginning. I met his gaze directly, but there's still so much I don't know about this life. About being queen to an alpha. About us. He set down his glass and moved to sit beside me on the cushioned window seat. Outside, the moon hung full and bright over the forest. What do you want to know? He asked. When wolves take mates, I began carefully, is it always for political reasons? Or can it be more? His expression softened. It can be much more. Wolves mate for life, Evelyn. When we find our true mate, it's a bond deeper than human marriage. A connection of souls. And your first wife? I asked gently. Was she that for you? Pain flickered across his face, but he answered honestly, no. Vivienne was kind, gentle. I respected her. But ours was a political union, like ours began. Began? I echoed, catching his word choice. His eyes, one brown, one silver, held mine. Yes, began. Heart pounding, I asked the question that had been growing inside me for weeks. And what is it becoming? Instead of answering with words, Dominic reached out, his scarred hand cupping my cheek with surprising tenderness. Slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and brushed his lips against mine. The kiss was gentle, questioning. Unlike anything I would have expected from the fearsome Alpha King, I responded in kind, my hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat quicken beneath my palm. When we parted, his expression was unguarded in a way I'd never seen before, vulnerable, hopeful, almost young despite the scars and the burdens he carried. I never expected you, he said softly. Never thought I could feel this way again. Or perhaps for the first time, truly. I was sent here to repay a debt, I whispered, but I'm staying for entirely different reasons. His smile, a real smile, transforming his face, was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. Before he could respond, however, a urgent knock sounded at my door. Dominic's expression instantly shifted back to the Alpha King as he rose to answer it. A guard stood there, breathing heavily. My king, forgive the interruption. Riders approaching from the Eastern Territory. Their Alpha requests an audience. The peace of our moment shattered. Dominic's body tensed, the warrior replacing the man who had just kissed me with such tenderness. How many? He demanded. A small party. 6 wolves, including their alpha. Varan. Dominic turned to me. Stay here. I'll handle this. No. I stood, straightening my gown. If the Eastern Alpha comes to speak with the Ravencroft King, He should find the Ravencroft Queen at his side. Pride flashed in Dominic's eyes. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. Very well, but stay close to me. We descended to the great hall, where the council had already assembled. Lady Helena gave me a sharp look, noting how close I stood to her brother, but said nothing. The Eastern wolves were escorted in, tension rippling through the hall. At their head walked a man I assumed was Alpha Varan, tall, lean, with calculating eyes and an arrogant bearing. Alpha Ravencroft, he greeted, voice silky smooth. How domestic you've become, and this must be the human bride I've heard so much about. His eyes raked over me dismissively. State your business, Varan, Dominic said coldly. You come to my territory after your failed ambush. Your welcome here is thin as ice. Varan smiled, revealing teeth too sharp to be fully human, even in his current form. I come with a proposal, a solution to the tensions between our packs. Tensions you created, Lady Helena interjected. Varan shrugged. History is written by survivors, my lady. But I digress. His gaze fixed on me again, more calculating this time. I propose a traditional challenge. Alpha against Alpha. The winner takes both territories. Murmurs spread through the hall. Such challenges were ancient tradition, but rarely invoked in modern times. You have nothing I want, Dominic replied dismissively, don't I? Varan's smile widened. Your human queen has made you weak, Ravencroft. Everyone can see it. The scars on your face are nothing compared to the ones on your heart. You've forgotten what it means to be a true alpha. I felt Dominic tense beside me, saw his hands clench into fists. Think about it, Varan continued. One fight to end the border disputes forever, unless, of course, you fear you cannot win. The hall fell silent, all eyes on Dominic. I could sense the trap. Varan was manipulating his pride, his position, forcing him to either accept a dangerous challenge or appear weak before his pack. Before Dominic could respond, I stepped forward. Alpha Varan, I said, my voice clear and steady. You speak of tradition, yet ignore its most sacred tenets. A challenge between alphas requires just cause, blood debt or territory violation. You have manufactured both through treachery, using my father as your pawn. Varan's eyes narrowed. The human thinks she understands wolf law. The queen understands it perfectly, Lady Helena said, moving to stand beside me, and she speaks with the authority of her position. I continued, drawing on everything I had learned about pack politics. If you wish to challenge Alpha Ravencroft, you must first prove your grievance legitimate before a council of neutral territory alphas. Murmurs of approval rippled through our pack members. Varan's smug expression faltered slightly. Furthermore, I added, any challenge must wait until the next full moon, as tradition dictates. Convenient, isn't it, that you arrive mere days after my husband was wounded in your ambush? Dominic's hand found mine, squeezing it once. Approval, support, something more. Varan's facade cracked, revealing the calculating predator beneath. You hide behind human technicalities, Ravencroft, behind your human mate. No, Dominic replied, his voice dangerously soft. I stand beside my queen who speaks the law correctly. Return at the full moon with legitimate grievance verified by neutral territory alphas, and I will consider your challenge. Until then, you are not welcome in Ravencroft lands. Fury flashed in Varan's eyes, quickly masked. Very well. The full moon, then. Prepare yourself, Scarred King. Your reign nears its end. As the eastern wolves were escorted out, tension slowly dissipated from the hall. Pack members gathered in small groups, discussing what had happened. Lady Helena approached us, an unusual expression on her face, something close to respect as she looked at me. Well done, she said simply. You bought us time. Time for what? I asked. Dominic's expression was grim. Time to prepare for war. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. The full moon approached rapidly, and with it, the potential for Varan's return with his challenge. Dominic threw himself into readying the pack, increasing border patrols, conducting training sessions that lasted from dawn until dusk, meeting endlessly with his council to discuss strategy. I rarely saw him alone during those days. Our brief moment of tenderness, That single kiss by firelight seemed almost a dream as war preparations consumed the castle, but occasionally I would catch him watching me across the training yard or during council meetings, something unspoken passing between us before duty reclaimed his attention. "He's worried," Lady Helena told me one afternoon as we inventoried medical supplies. In the days since the confrontation with Varan, she had become something of an ally, if not quite a friend. Not for himself, but for the pack. For you. "Varan won't have a legitimate grievance," I said, counting bundles of dried herbs. "The neutral alphas won't support his challenge." Lady Helena's expression turned grim. "Varan is cunning. If he can't secure official approval, he may create a situation where Dominic has no choice but to fight. Grievance or no grievance." The weight of her words settled heavily on my shoulders. I had bought time with my knowledge of pack law, but perhaps only delayed the inevitable. That night, I sought out Dominic. I found him in the map room, alone, studying territory boundaries by lamplight. He looked exhausted, the scars on his face standing out starkly against his pale skin. "You should rest," I said softly. He looked up, his mismatched eyes softening at the sight of me. "So should you." I moved to stand beside him, looking down at the maps. "What are you planning?" "Every possibility," he replied, running a hand through his hair. "Varan won't come alone to the full moon meeting. He'll bring warriors, positioned strategically. If I refuse his challenge, regardless of what the neutral alphas decide, he could trigger a larger conflict. And if you accept," his eyes met mine, "then I fight, alpha against alpha." Fear clutched at my heart. Could you win? Dominic was silent for a long moment. "Before Moonfall Ridge, without question. Now." He didn't need to finish. The scars on his face were just the visible reminders of that terrible battle. I had seen the others that marked his body, had felt the way he sometimes stiffened with pain from old wounds. "There must be another way," I said, my mind racing. "Something we haven't considered." Dominic straightened, placing his hands on my shoulders. "Evelyn, if the worst happens, don't," I interrupted, placing my fingers against his lips. "I won't discuss your defeat or death as if they're foregone conclusions." A ghost of a smile touched his lips beneath my fingers. "I was going to say, if the worst happens, the pack will look to you. Lady Helena will support your claim as queen. You've earned their respect." The idea of leading without him made my chest ache. "I didn't come here to take your place. I came here because of my father's debts. I stayed because—" I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. We had never spoken of feelings directly, even after that gentle kiss. "Because?" he prompted, his voice low. "Because I found something I never expected," I whispered. "A home. A purpose." I met his gaze directly. Someone worth loving. The declaration hung in the air between us. Dominic's eyes widened slightly, his hands tightening on my shoulders. "Evelyn," he began, his voice rough with emotion. Before he could continue, the door burst open. A guard stood there, breathing heavily. "My king. Riders approaching from the village. There's been an attack." The moment shattered. Dominic was instantly the Alpha King again, striding toward the door. "Casualties?" "Several wounded, my king. Eastern wolves. They struck just after sunset. My blood ran cold. Varan." Dominic looked back at me, conflict clear in his eyes, the Alpha's duty warring with the man's desire to finish our conversation. "Go," I said. "I'll have the healers prepare." With a nod of gratitude, he followed the guard, leaving me alone with the echo of words spoken and unspoken between us. The wounded arrived within the hour. Villagers bearing defensive injuries from protecting their homes and children. Master Garrick and I worked side by side, treating them as they recounted the attack. A coordinated raid by Eastern wolves, targeting food stores and livestock, setting fire to outlying structures. They said it was a message, one man reported as I bandaged his arm, that we belonged to the wrong Alpha. Dominic appeared in the doorway of the healing rooms, his expression thunderous. "How many?" 20 wolves, at least," the wounded man replied. They wore Eastern Territory markings. "Varan is trying to provoke you," I said quietly, as Dominic helped me gather fresh bandages. "He wants you angry, impulsive." "He's succeeding," Dominic growled, his eyes flashing with barely controlled rage. I placed my hand over his. This is what he wants, to make you fight on his terms. Dominic took a deep breath, visibly struggling to master his anger. You're right, he admitted, but I cannot let attacks on our people go unanswered. No, I agreed, but we answer strategically, not emotionally. Something shifted in his gaze as he looked at me. Pride, perhaps, or recognition. We, he repeated softly. Yes, we, I affirmed. Your battles are mine now. Your pack is my pack. The next morning, Dominic called a full council meeting. Leaders from every aspect of pack life attended. Warriors, healers, village representatives, elders. I sat at his right hand, Lady Helena at his left. Varan believes he can break us with fear, Dominic announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. He is mistaken. We will not cower, but neither will we be baited into a trap. He outlined his plan: increased defenses for the village, strategic redeployment of warriors, and a formal complaint to the neutral territory alphas, documenting Varan's unprovoked attack. But there's more, he continued, his gaze meeting mine briefly. Our queen has proposed an additional measure. All eyes turned to me as I stood. The room fell silent, no longer the suspicious stares of my first days, but attentive, respectful. Varan's strength lies in his unpredictability and our isolation, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. We change that by forming stronger alliances with neighboring territories. Not just military alliances, but trade, cultural exchange, mutual support. I unfurled a map, different from the one Dominic had been studying. This one marked with potential alliance points, trade routes, shared resources. The southern pack has grain we need. We have medicinal herbs they seek. The western territories need protection. We need their metalwork. Together we create a network Varan cannot challenge alone. Murmurs spread through the room, surprised, thoughtful, gradually approving. Dominic watched me with undisguised admiration. Diplomacy, Lady Helena said, something like respect in her tone. A human approach. A practical approach, I corrected. Wolf or human, we all seek the same things: safety, prosperity, peace for our children. The council debated the details, but by midday, messengers were dispatched to neighboring territories with alliance proposals. For the first time since Varan's threat, I felt a flicker of hope. That evening, Dominic sought me out in the castle gardens. I sat on a stone bench beneath a flowering tree, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Your proposal was brilliantly received, he said, settling beside me. The Southern Alpha has already sent word accepting preliminary trade discussions. That's wonderful, I replied, genuinely pleased. You've become more than I could have imagined, Dominic said softly. When you first arrived, a village girl, payment for a debt. I never expected, nor did I admitted. I hated you then, or at least, I hated what you represented, and now? His question hung in the twilight air between us. I turned to face him fully. Now I see the man behind the Alpha, the leader who places his pack above himself, the king who carries wounds visible and invisible with such strength. My hand reached up to gently trace the scars on his face, a touch I would never have dared in those early days. I see someone worth fighting for, I whispered. Worth loving. Dominic caught my hand, pressing it against his cheek. I never thought to love again after Vivienne, he confessed. I believed that part of me died at Moonfall Ridge with so many others. And now? I echoed his question. His answer came not in words, but in action. He drew me close, his lips finding mine with gentle urgency. Unlike our first tentative kiss, this one held promise, passion, a future unfolding between us. When we finally parted, breathless, his forehead rested against mine. I love you, Evelyn, he said simply. Not as payment for a debt, not as a political alliance, but as the woman who brought me back to life. Joy bloomed within me, bright and unexpected, a flower pushing through winter snow. And I love you, Dominic, not as the Alpha King, but as the man you truly are. We might have remained there, lost in each other, had not the warning horns sounded from the watchtowers. We broke apart, the moment shattered by 3 long blasts, the signal for approaching danger. The full moon isn't for 3 more days, I said, as we hurried toward the castle. Dominic's expression darkened. Varan isn't waiting for tradition. Guards met us at the castle entrance. Eastern wolves, my king, a large force approaching from the forest. How many? Dominic demanded. 50, perhaps more. Their alpha leads them. Dominic turned to me, conflict clear in his eyes. Evelyn. Don't ask me to hide, I interrupted. Whatever comes, we face it together. Something like resignation mixed with pride crossed his face. With a nod, he summoned Lady Helena and his war council. Within minutes, the castle was mobilizing for defense, warriors taking positions, non-combatants moved to secure inner chambers, archers to the walls. I stood beside Dominic on the battlements as Varan's forces emerged from the forest edge. The Eastern Alpha rode at their head, his expression visible even at this distance, smug confidence, predatory anticipation. Ravencroft, he called, his voice carrying across the open space between forest and castle. Face me now, or watch your people die one by one. Dominic's hand found mine, squeezing once before releasing it. I must answer him. I know, I said, my heart pounding with fear and determination. But not alone. Together we descended to the castle gates. Lady Helena met us there with a contingent of our strongest warriors. This is madness, she hissed. He violates every pack law with this attack. Which means he's desperate, I replied, or believes he cannot lose. The massive gates swung open, and Dominic strode out to meet his challenger, every inch the Alpha King despite the scars that Varan mocked. I walked half a step behind, my position as queen clear to all watching. Varan dismounted, a cruel smile playing across his lips. So the scarred king emerges with his human pet, he sneered. How touching. You come without neutral Alpha sanction, Dominic stated coldly. You attack my people, violate my territory, ignore sacred traditions. You have no honor, Varan. Honor is for the weak, Varan replied. Power is what matters, and you, Ravencroft, have grown weak. His gaze flicked to me. Soft, human. If I am weak, Dominic said, his voice dangerously quiet, then face me now. Alpha to alpha, just the two of us. Varan laughed. Why should I agree to that when I hold every advantage? My forces outnumber your visible defenders. Surrender your territory, step down as alpha, and perhaps I'll let your pack live. His eyes narrowed. Though your queen might make a satisfying prize, I felt rather than saw Dominic's rage at the threat. Before he could respond rashly, I stepped forward. You speak of advantages, Alpha Varan, I called clearly, ensuring all his warriors could hear. But you count incorrectly. Confusion flickered across his face. The human speaks riddles, not riddles, I replied. Alliances. As if on cue, howls erupted from the forest behind Varan's forces, dozens, then scores of wolves announcing their presence. The eastern wolves turned in alarm as warriors from the southern and western packs emerged from the trees, effectively surrounding them. Varan's confident expression crumbled. What treachery is this? No treachery, came a new voice as the Southern Alpha, a formidable woman with dark skin and commanding presence, stepped forward. Alliance, as requested by Queen Evelyn and approved by the Neutral Territory Council. The Western Alpha joined her, his massive frame intimidating even from a distance. Your unsanctioned attack violates pack law, Varan. The Neutral Council has ruled against you. I couldn't help the small smile that formed as I watched Varan realize his mistake. In his arrogance, he had assumed our messengers were merely seeking help, not knowing that they carried evidence of his previous attacks, his manipulation of my father, his violations of sacred traditions to the Neutral Council. The ruling is clear, the Southern Alpha continued. You forfeit your right to challenge. You forfeit your position as Alpha. No, Varan snarled, his face contorting with fury. I recognize no such ruling. With unexpected speed, he lunged. Not at Dominic as everyone anticipated, but at me. I had only a moment to register the flash of his blade before Dominic moved, faster than I had ever seen him move, intercepting Varan's attack. The two alphas collided with brutal force. Varan's knife sliced through the air where I had stood as Dominic drove him back, his own blade drawn. Challenge accepted, Dominic growled. Around us, chaos erupted. Varan's forces, seeing their alpha engaged, attacked. Our allies responded. The battle spilled across the open ground between castle and forest. But I saw none of it. My attention fixed on the deadly dance between Dominic and Varan. They fought with the ferocity of true alphas. Varan with reckless aggression, Dominic with controlled power. Blades clashed, then were discarded as both men began to shift, their human forms giving way to massive wolves. Varan's coat pale as winter frost, Dominic's black as midnight. The wolf battle was terrifying to behold, teeth slashing, powerful bodies colliding, growls that shook the very ground. I watched, heart in my throat, as they tore at each other with primal fury. Varan was younger, perhaps faster, but Dominic fought with the wisdom of experience. When Varan lunged for his throat, Dominic twisted, his powerful jaws closing on the Eastern Alpha's shoulder instead. Varan howled in pain, but broke free, circling for another attack. Blood matted both wolves' fur now. The snow beneath them stained crimson. They clashed again and again, neither gaining clear advantage, until Varan, growing desperate, made a crucial mistake. He glanced toward his retreating forces, momentarily distracted. Dominic seized the opportunity, lunging with precision. His teeth found Varan's throat, closing with terrible finality. The Eastern Alpha struggled, then went still. Silence fell across the battlefield as Dominic stood over his fallen opponent, still in wolf form, his message clear to all who witnessed. The Alpha King of Ravencroft remained undefeated. Slowly, deliberately, Dominic shifted back to human form. Blood streaked his skin from numerous wounds, but he stood tall, victorious. The remaining Eastern wolves immediately submitted, dropping to their knees before the Alpha who had defeated their leader. The Eastern Territory falls to Ravencroft, the neutral council representative declared, as is the right of conquest. I ran to Dominic as he swayed slightly, exhaustion and injury finally showing. My arms slipped around him, supporting his weight. "It's over," he murmured, leaning against me. "Yes," I agreed, relief washing through me. "It's over." The aftermath of battle brought changes to the territories. With Varan defeated, the Eastern Wolves needed leadership. Rather than absorbing them completely, Dominic appointed a fair-minded beta from their own ranks as their new alpha, under Ravencroft protection and alliance. It was an unprecedented move that earned respect from all neighboring territories. My alliance strategy expanded, creating a network of cooperation that strengthened all participating packs. Trade flourished. Peace settled over the region for the first time in generations. 1 month after the battle, on a clear spring evening with stars scattered like diamonds across the sky, Dominic took me to a secluded clearing in the forest. A small stream bubbled nearby, and wildflowers carpeted the ground. "This place is beautiful," I said, turning to find him watching me with undisguised love. "It's sacred to the pack," he explained, "where true mates make their eternal bonds under the witness of moon and stars." My heart quickened as he took my hands in his. "Evelyn," he said softly, "you came to me as payment for a debt. You stayed by choice. You risked your life for mine, brought wisdom to our pack, and love to my life." He knelt before me, still holding my hands. Our union began as a transaction. I ask now that we remake it as something sacred. Be my mate, my queen. My heart, not by duty. Tears blurred my vision as I looked down at this powerful Alpha King kneeling before me, his scars silvered by moonlight, his eyes, one brown, one silver, filled with vulnerable hope. "Yes," I whispered, pulling him to his feet. "My choice is you. It has been for longer than I realized." The ceremony that followed was intimate, ancient, binding our souls in the tradition of wolves. As Dominic marked me as his true mate, the silver pendant that had been my mother's last gift pressed between our hearts. Your heart is stronger than you know. Her words echoed in my memory. She had been right. Strong enough to survive being traded away. Strong enough to find love in unexpected places. Strong enough to become not just a queen by title, but a true alpha queen by actions and choice. Later, as we lay together beneath the stars, Dominic's arms around me and his heartbeat steady beneath my ear, I reflected on the strange path that had brought me here. "What are you thinking?" he murmured, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on my skin. "That sometimes debts create unexpected treasures," I replied, lifting my head to meet his gaze. "That sometimes what begins as imprisonment becomes freedom." His scarred face, once terrifying to me, now beloved, softened with a smile as he drew me closer. "And sometimes," he whispered against my lips, "what begins as a transaction becomes the greatest love story ever told." As his lips met mine beneath the watchful moon, I knew with bone-deep certainty that my 19-year-old self, terrified and resentful on her wedding day, could never have imagined this outcome. That the debts that had seemed to end my life had instead begun it. That the scarred Alpha King who had claimed me as payment had instead given me something priceless. A true home, a purpose, a love that transformed us both. Some debts, it seemed, were worth every payment.